Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, sonically, people may not realize what the bass is or what it does. I mean, the average layperson. But if you took like a band, a live performance, or even a record, and removed the bass from the mix, from the live band, from the record, it would be a phenomenal change for the worse. I'm not just saying that, but the music feels very, very incomplete without the sonics of the low end. So if you remove that, a lot of the body and the feeling from the music suddenly kind of goes away. That's why I have to say I'm not really, as kind of cool or clever as it is, I'm not really a big fan of bands or combos that don't have bass players. Then we know who I'm talking about. I mean, I like the idea, but I think ultimately it starts to want. It starts to feel like something's missing. So I prefer bands with bass players. Yeah, well, I had a friend that was my web designer at the time, and we were trying to develop my website, and one way to get content was he recommended I actually maybe write some stories. So I started writing and doing like a little bit of interviewing, and I came to realize that aside from me, and I think I've experienced so much, and I have crazy stories that I've been, interesting tales and situations I've been in, but a lot of other bass players, I'm sure a lot of musicians in general, but a lot of other bass players seem to have a lot of interesting stories too. And as I was talking to different bass players and interviewing them, the idea came up to maybe like collate it and try to compile it into some kind of a book. And so that's kind of how the idea started. But I didn't want to write just a book of interviews. I wanted to be something a little bit more interesting to people that even weren't bass players. So the book starts out with some very personal stories, like very human interest stories, which I think everyone can relate to. And I think with the bass players, I tried to pull the human interest side of what they do, rather than just talk about the instrument, the technical aspect, or the musical aspect of what they do. It's like the lifestyle, and how do you maintain, and through all the trials and tribulations, how do you keep yourself going through the changes in the music business and dealing with family, and what are the things that drive you, aesthetically and all of that. So I think that's kind of the angle I came at it from, to try to keep it accessible to a lot of people, not just musicians or not just bass players.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you do address in that book, which is about the changes in the music business, about the fact that there is no record industry anymore.
Right.
So, I mean, you as a kid growing up listening to records, you wanted to play on records. What do you think? What's going to inspire the next generation of bass players?
Well, I mean, bass players, I think, or musicians in general, will always want to, hopefully, they will always want to express themselves on an instrument. Now, depending on how intimate you get with your instrument, depends on how well you can express yourself. And I think that the good ones will always kind of rise to the top. But that being said, it seems that the opportunities for musicians to go out there and make a living are really scarce. So you have to be incredibly industrious and creative to come up with ideas that will enable you to do that. And one of the ideas is just by not just being a bass player. There's no kind of specialists anymore. Everyone that's successful has to be a generalist. They have to be able to play bass. They have to be able to maybe do recording and producing, or editing, or working with social media. You have to kind of do all of these things to be able to get as much opportunity to be able to go out and actually make a living, or from the various ancillary income streams, compile it into a reasonable living. What's that sound?
Oh,
it's a siren.
Can we record that?
It's so distant.
Oh, is it okay? We can keep talking.
Yeah.
All right.
It's like, see, this is like, this for New York. This is like crickets. This is the sound of nature.
It's fine. It's so
You want to riff off of the siren like Miles?
No, it's okay. I don't want to interrupt nature.
What view from the, so what's been the feedback from that?
It's been fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, people are loving the reviews. The reviews have been great. People that have bought the books, even complete non-musicians, like really like it. So I think that at least I was able to accomplish what I set out to do, which like get the point of the human interest side of the whole thing across, which was very rewarding.
What did you learn from the other bass players that you spoke to?
I learned one very important thing that almost invariably, with a couple of exceptions, all the bass players I approached, even if I didn't know them, were incredibly generous and with their time, with the things they wanted to say, and had great things to say. You know, they're very gregarious people for the most part, which I love, being a bass player. And so I found, like, aside from the camaraderie of playing the same instrument, I find that, you know, I can relate to the personalities of bass players, because they seem to be the ones that, for whatever reason, they seem to be the ones that have a lot of stuff that they've observed. You know, because we're all usually the ones on the side looking at everything and playing. And which, by the way, is one of the reasons that all the girls think we're great. Okay,
So would you say, what are your thoughts on the fact that almost the personality of the best bass players, and you've certainly written about the best players, they take on the personality of their instrument?
Absolutely,
Their
absolutely.
Okay.
And I find that, you know, I mean, in a lot of sense, bass players, by nature of the instrument, have to be generous, because they have to cede territory. You know, you can't be a bass player and come up and try to, you know, and play, you know, and, you know, take the spotlight away and do all of that. You can't, unless you're Flea. You know, then you can do it. But there's not many people like that around. But, so, you know, I think just, it's funny how the personality seems to match the way the music is played. You have to be generous and respectful, you know, and I think that's the kind of thing I found with all of these players that I talked to, which was great.
That is absolutely.